Alright guys, welcome back to another video on the Bandemic channel. Now I know I've been away for a while, but I've been sick and busy, so that's why. And that's why my voice might also sound a bit weird right now. But I'm back now, and today I'll be looking at misunderstood characters in different forms of media. And this may be like films, shows, like even books. I feel like these characters, they don't get their due diligence from the fans, or they might just be looked down upon when I don't think they actually deserve to be. But before I start the video, I'm gonna need you guys to join the Bandemic Hub Discord server. Now I've been promoting it for a bit, and I'll continue to do it. It's the link in the bio, or you can just message me at Bandemic8 on Discord for the link. Now to start off, we'll go to familiar territory, with that being Cobra Kai itself. And there are a lot of characters that you could say are misunderstood on Cobra Kai, but one in particular for me is Robbie Keane. Now these days Robbie gets a lot more love as a character, but it definitely wasn't always like this. Now me personally, I've always preferred Miguel to Robbie, but I do still think Robbie has been hard done by in the show. At the start of the show, you see how neglectful parenting from Johnny led him down the wrong path, but after joining forces with Daniel, he starts to get his life back on track again, just for Daniel to completely lose his mind after finding out he's Johnny's son, thinking it's like some sort of plot or scheme. Then he loses the All Valley, but at least has Daniel back on his side. And this was at the end of season 1, so let's skip forward all the way to the end of season 2. Robbie has to make up for Sam's reckless actions. He's then berated again by Daniel because he's under the impression that Robbie's done something wrong, and stays with Johnny for the time being. Soon after this is a whole school fight where he gets attacked for trying to literally stop the fight. Admittedly, from Miguel's point of view, it does look like Robbie's attacking Tori, but this isn't Robbie's fault, it's just how Miguel saw the situation. All of this leads to him kicking Miguel over the railing, which was definitely one of his worst moments. I still feel like you have to understand his perspective with how personal the words exchanged during the fight were. Also, it wasn't his intention to kick him over, but I definitely do see how this would be one of his more criticized acts. After the first 2 seasons though, we saw him join Cobra Kai, reunite with Johnny due to Kenny's actions, and even patch up things with Miguel and Hawk later on. Even in all of these situations, I feel like he kind of slightly gets done dirty. The first activity him and Johnny actually do together is look for his arch nemesis Miguel, and it makes it worse that he was insecure about the whole relationship Miguel had with Robbie's own father Johnny. Then we look at the Miguel situation where Miguel never actually apologized to Robbie at all. I feel like throughout the show Robbie gets constantly like slightly done dirty in situations, and mostly viewed in a negative manner due to the popularity of characters that he goes against, such as Johnny or like Hawk. I'm not saying he isn't flawed, and I do think all Cobra Kai characters are flawed in some way, but I never feel like even if it's not now, he was a very misunderstood character at some point of the show, especially early on. Anyways, you could say Robbie might get animated at times during the show, but his next character definitely gets animated in more than one way. The character I'm talking about is Benson from Regular Show. Now if you guys are familiar with Regular Show, you'd know how insane most of the plots are on the show. However, the majority of these plots are caused by Mordecai and Rigby. These are the 2 main characters of the show who are supposed to be working but slack off and get into these situations. So I think due to this, it would make sense why their boss Benson is so pissed all the time. He has to deal with these 2 grown men constantly going on LSD inspired adventures during work hours. Now don't get me wrong, as a kid I hated Benson too, and I found him really annoying growing up, but once you get to a more like mature age, you realize Benson is mostly justified in what he does. I mean, you could even go the opposite direction and actually praise how despite threatening to fire them, he never actually does do it. He also saved their lives in that one stick hockey episode. We saw how his upbringing caused him to develop anger issues due to the nature of his household when he was growing up. You could also point out the reason why he never actually fired Mordecai and Rigby being due to him knowing how it may affect someone, as shown in this one scene. Overall though, apart from a few occasions where he went too far, such as him eating the world's best burgers that Mordecai and Rigby had been waiting for, he was still a good guy, and even with his anger issues and outbursts, he had a lot more patience with them than others did, such as Susan. Like bro, Susan was going crazy in that one episode. Alright, now for the final character I want to talk about in this video. It's going to be a more polarizing figure than the other 2. Don't get me wrong, like Robbie, you could argue. Benson, I think you could say maybe, but I feel like those 2 characters, even with fans, they're a bit more popular now at least. But this character has been under scrutiny in the past, which I don't think is entirely fair. Now the character I'm talking about is Greg Heffley from the Diary of the Wimpy Kid series. Now I feel like Diary of the Wimpy Kid could have its own separate solo video in the future, but I definitely do feel like Greg is somewhat misunderstood. You get popular videos on the internet calling him a sociopath, when in reality he's just a somewhat morally questionable but mostly regular 12-year-old. I feel like most people do forget that he's only 12 to 13 years old throughout most of the books, and also the environment he grew up in. His parents are very questionable characters who clearly favor Manny over Greg at all times, and even though Roderick gets a lot of love, he also does treat Greg badly. Now I get the older brother and younger brother dynamic, but you do have to recognize how these experiences have shaped Greg into who he is now. Greg is also called a simp for how he prioritizes girls at times, but to be honest, you have to just view it as the middle school crush thing. Like it's not serious enough to actually be a reason to hate the guy. Now the part of the criticism I do get for Greg is how he's a bad friend to Rowley, as he did try to steal the attention away when Rowley broke his arm because of Greg, and it's probably one of the most valid criticisms of Greg, as you could point out how any age you should know better than to try and steal someone's attention for their broken arm. But I do think this shows narcissistic tendencies, but you have to remember the lack of love or care Greg received compared to Manny, and especially especially compared to Rowley himself. I see how his parents treat him and then Greg with his. I do have to accept all of the books and movies were written from Greg's perspective, meaning they definitely could have been distorted to what he wanted it to show. At the same time, I don't think he's scared to tell stories where he is the butt of the joke or he gets belittled or disrespected. Overall, I do feel like Greg is just a flawed middle school kid with slightly neglectful parents. At least from his point of view, that's. I mean, I don't doubt their love for him as they have been there in his life and cared for him, but the treatment of Manny tells a whole different story to how much they love each kid. Anyways, that's all for this video. I hope you guys can understand my logic for all these characters, and let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree, and if you like or dislike these characters. And on the topic of liking, drop a like on the video, share it with your great ancestors, subscribe and join the Discord server, and see you next time. It won't be as long.